My name is Martin Sander, and today is February the 16th, 2013. And could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Doris Eaton, kind of a famous rug hooker. Not a hooker, a rug hooker. And I've been doing this since 1961 because I had 5 children and I wanted something that I liked doing. So I started in with then, and I just can't leave it alone. It's addictive, so I have fun doing it. I use French's material pretty well altogether. Just used material, and that's exactly the way my grandmother would have done it. She's the one who taught me how to do this, and I think it's still the very best recycling process in the world. Make something very pretty out of it. I want to show you first the way I finish a rug, because it's my own invention. I put on, when I start the rug, I draw a line where I want the binding to be, which is going to be the edge of the rug. Then I sew the binding on at the very beginning, not to finish it. And then I hook on the reverse side, so that when I'm finished, I have a very low edge of hooking there. And the reason for that is that now my rug is tapering off to the edge. I turn the binding, when it's all finished, I turn the binding and hem it back, very simple, and I've got a perfect edge for my rug that's going to take the wear better than the wool would on the edge of it. So that's called the Eaton edge. And that you do from the reverse side, on this side, and then you start hooking your rug. And I'm starting the way they would have done it, a very simple pattern. I've got a pen here. I've divided this off into squares, and when you put your pen down and pull it along, it'll follow a straight line. So I do that to get my pattern going. And then I hook. This is the color that's separating it. It's a piece of yarn. I'm going to use that to add more squares to my piece. My hook is my favorite. There are many different kinds of hooks, but this is a simple little hook. The whole process is such a basic thing. It's just a hook, little hook and a cut rag, and you're gone, you're away. Use your imagination. Very, very simple. And then it's up to you what you do with it. I'm using what might have been the way my grandmother would start a rug. She'd start with her squares, and then she'd use up her colors, and in between she'd put something plain. And that's one way to do it. I want to show you, this is one I've made at night, but again, it's the squares, but I've added strawberries, a pattern. It could be flowers, it could be anything, but basically it's the same kind of thing. So I think this is the way rug hooking started. The way I've developed it from there is to tell a story. And this one, do you want to help me hold this one?
Yeah.
Story rug. My neighbor Eddie came every week, and he was a fascinating man. He was the best neighbor we ever had. He'd come with a little ditty. He used to sing with Don Messer, not on the television, but he was associated with them. So he'd sing a little ditty for us. He'd have a brand new word, a real big, long word. So that was the word of the day. And he'd come in and sit at the table with Ron in the kitchen. The dog is waiting. I combed his fur off and hooked him with his own fur, and he's waiting for 2 cookies. Eddie has them in his pocket, and they're better than mine because they're boughten. So the boughten cookies and the dog and Ron sit around the table and natter. They talk old times and where they used to work and the people they knew. Eddie knew everybody in the community, and we were new people living there, so he would talk to us about that. I'm sitting in the next room, hooking my rugs, listening to all this chatter out here. The stairway, it's a hooked rug that I made when I first moved here, and this is my studio on the end of the house. So this is a cross section. If you took the whole front of the house away from the street, this is what it would look like. So that became a story rug. The third thing I want to show you is the kookiest thing I've ever made. It's a piece of a scarf from Frenchie's, again, and I've hooked it into the backing and let it drip and fall down wherever it wanted, and made a hanging out of it. Now, do you have any questions you want to ask?
From your experience, has the process changed over the years?
Basically, no. I'm trying to keep it the way it used to be.
But you also...
I feel that's important.
You also add your own new tricks to it, though?
Yes, that's right. And the stories you tell and the things in your life that you try to put down in the wool. I'm not sure my grandmother did as much of that as I do, but I just love it.
Also, we've seen a few rugs that were having black outlines on their pattern.
Yes.
And this doesn't seem to be used this much today anymore.
It isn't by anybody but me. I was told when I first started from the professional people in the States where I went to school sometimes, that you'd never use black. But I love it. And if you knew, if I could show you all my rugs, you'd see about 50% of them have black outlines. It was a very typical way of, I think it showed up the piece, the design of the rug to start with, and then you could fill your colors in.
So this is a way for you to make your work stand out?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That's really a favorite way for me to hook.
Do you have any favorite kind of design, something you prefer doing over something else?
It seems to be changing. I go from the very first things I did and the simplicity of them, and I'm getting more abstract and more adventuresome with it. There's just no end to the possibilities of it. And I love doing it, and the fabrics that I find, I just love using up the old materials. That's one thing. And sometimes the fabrics tell me what to do with them. You know what I mean? The colors seem to... I'm doing one at home now of a great waterfall and a big tree over here in the corner, and the woods back there. Just making it up as I go along. I love it.
So as you said before, you get most of your materials from Frenchie's?
Yes, it's almost all from Frenchie's. Almost everything.
So are there any additional tools you use to in this process besides this?
No, that's my little hook, and that did it. The first hook I ever had was my grandmother's, and it was made by my dad from an awl, which he used in the tool. It was a tool that he made into a hook, and it's still going. I gave it to my daughter. I've got my grandmother's coat, and that's in almost every single thing I've ever done. She died in 1953, and I've used her coat ever since. A little bit of it in each one.
Doris, can you do a bit more down?
That's not as good. I've got a cutting machine I forgot to bring, but you have to tear the material, get it absolutely straight, because if you ever cut a cross grain, you've destroyed the material. It just won't stand up to it. So you tear a piece of material like that and get it right on the straight of the goods, and then run it through a little machine. And the Cadillac of the cutting machines for rug hookers is made right here in Bridgewater, the Bolivar cutter. So I cut this piece. You go down, pull the tails up to the top, so you never have to turn it over to trim it. And pull loop after loop. And as you get used to doing this, it gets easier and easier all the time. But at the beginning, you're so conscious of making those perfectly straight, and it doesn't matter. You get a rhythm as you go along, and it just happens. Very, very simple. I have a pair of scissors somewhere. I thought I did. Here we are. This is a magnet out of from the hardware store. And I've put it on a drapery hook, tack it into my burlap, and that holds the scissors and the hook. So I'm down at the bottom of that. Cut through the loop and pull it out and start somewhere else. Very, very simple. I used to teach a lot. I went to courses in the States and learned how to shade flowers and how to do very intricate patterns and all of that. And then I came back to Nova Scotia and taught this. And that's exactly how I taught it, what I had learned. I don't do that anymore. I give someone a piece of empty burlap, linen it is, and rags to do it with, maybe a box like that, and send them home, and they are amazing me, what they're coming up with on their own. All I have to do is show them exactly what I just showed you, how to pull the loops up with your hook. And they're just, let them go, and they're just amazing. I've got a little cousin in Illinois. She's never been to Nova Scotia. When she came, she was interested in the hooking, so I showed her what I do. And she went home, and she's been hooking ever since. And she showed me pictures, because I'd given her some instructions on how to dye material. And she sent me pictures, this gorgeous runner. You wouldn't believe. Her mother can't believe it. So it's all for fun. It's a very relaxing thing at the end of a day, or I used to feel that way when the children were home. I'd be so busy with the food and well, you know what it's like with a family. But at the end of the day, to sit down and relax with my hooking, there's nothing any better. Ron didn't want to watch television all alone, but he told me what was going on, and I kept him. Had a lot of fun at it.
How long on average does it take you to finish a rug?
That's a good question. We did a very large one for Bridgewater Mersey Pulp and Paper Company for their VIP lodge along the Medway River. And I squared it off into foot squares, and we sat around the frames like that and hooked it. And everyone was different. The more you hook, the better the rhythm, and I suppose the faster you go. But it depends on the piece that you're hooking on, how much detail there is in it, and how much stopping and starting and getting materials ready. It's pretty hard to say.
Are there any materials you find harder to work with?
Harder to work with?
Well, you know, depending on the texture, is there anything that might be harder to pull through the rug?
I suppose, yes, something as heavy as a very heavy worsted coat would be almost too hard to hook. And then this is something, oh, I hope I brought something of it. It's called Roving anyway, and it's in, we're so lucky to be able to get it these days. There are several places now where they have the sheep's wool, and they card it into roving like that. This is absolutely wonderful to use, and it peels itself down, and that's super. It's very soft. We had sheep. I wanted the sheep because I wanted the wool that they gave me. But I've got our living room rug I hooked in 1994, and it's just as new looking as when I hooked it. It's all done with sheep's wool. I found a man along the river, and he spun it for me into one ply, but this is just as good. It peels down and makes beautiful material. And it's wearing beautifully. So hard, maybe, but easy is better. That's so easy to use, and so I don't need a cutter for that. I just peel it down, and that's what it does. There's a girl in Dieppe, Heidi, and she has a wonderful shop, does her own dyeing and spinning, and has her own sheep. She keeps them till they pass away. She doesn't kill them. There's another place in Gaspereau Fibers. And there's a new person in Petit Revere, and she's got bringing in all kinds of silk from India and different kinds of materials. Very exciting. I think that part of it is what's new in hooking. My grandmother wouldn't have used such a variety of things. They weren't available to her, and she wouldn't have used quite so much. She used old clothing, men's pants, whatever was wool. The wool will wear better and stay stay better. It gets a patina with age. If you use cotton or some of the artificial fabrics, they get just grungy, and they're almost impossible to clean. But the wool isn't. The wool is perfect for a long time. I even have a couple of my grandmother's rugs. Very proud of them.
When you're a beginner, is there any materials someone should start using, something that's easier to work with?
No, I'd start them with what I'm doing now. Anything they can find. Recycle it.
Do you dye some of your materials?
Beg pardon?
Do you dye some of your materials?
I used to do it all the time. A lot of dye. I don't bother now. I just find a pattern that will use what I've got. You don't know how much material I've got. But I'll tell you, it's a third of the house. It's this big room here. Floor to ceiling, shelving, and great box plastic tote things full of used material. I've got enough for 10 generations. But I'll use a lot of it. As I said once before, if you've got some special material, you see something in that, I mean, look at that. That could be a beautiful something. I'll have to think of what to do with it. But that's an inspiration in itself. And I think people are finding that out, that the material kind of lends itself to certain things, certain designs, certain color schemes. It might just be color, but...
When you used to dye, how did you do that?
Beg pardon?
When you used to dye your materials, how did you do that?
I learned how to do it very professionally. dividing my material into absolutely even pieces and dyeing them one at a time in a glass jar with measured dye in each one. So I got a perfect, it was called a swatch, and it goes from very light to very dark. And I can do all of that. Onion skin is a perfect way to do dyeing. You put layers of different kinds of fabric and then onion skins and steam it. Put enough water in it just so that it comes up to the top of the fabric. Cover it and put it in the oven. And time it, 20 minutes, and you've got your dye. I can do great big, I've got a great big bathtub, baby's bathtub, and it's in white enamel, and that does great big backgrounds for me. I measure carefully, and I keep records of what I'm doing, so if I ever need to replace that color, I can do it, because I've measured the material and the dye I'm using.
Could you show us again a little bit on how you finish off your edges?
How to finish off?
Your edges? Could you
Yes,
show us some of that
I
again?
certainly can. I've put this all around the edge, and this is what I'm so excited about with this edge. And people, I know we took it to the rug school, and the Ontario teacher said, oh, that'll never work. But people who are doing it really, really like it. So let's take a piece that's all done on the edge here. This is the part that one row has been hooked from this side. And when I put the binding around it, the binding's put on first and then the one row, put the binding on it, it shows, you want it to match, it goes around that and it takes the wear of the rug. My daughter repairs rugs, and this is where I was going with this. What can I do to make that wear better? Because that's the expense of repairing the rug. Almost always is the edge of the rug. So do that and hem it back. And it's so simple. If that's all done ahead of time, I've taken it to the sewing machine and sewed on the binding with no other material in the way, and it just works beautifully. When you come to the edge, I'll cut that off. I can find my scissors again. You miter the corner like that, or you cut off an angle of the backing so that you don't get the bulk of that. And when you turn it over from each corner, you miter that and put it down like that. It really works well. Very happy with it, as you can tell. The other way of doing it was we used to put the binding on and just turn it back after it was hooked. This one, that binding is going around the loop that's on the other side now. So it's sticking out more, and it's taking the wear of the rug. A lot of people whip their binding or their edging, and it's with yarn, and often good pure wool yarn, but it doesn't wear. So I just, and that's the finishing.
So how are the edges normally finished?
The way I was taught was to sew the binding on like this. And when I was finished hooking, I turned it back. And the advantage to this is that it's making the binding stick out to take the wear. This is one way to do it. Here in Lunenburg County, it was often, they crocheted a pretty edging all the way around the rug before they started with yarn. And then they would hook the rug and turn that back, turn the burlap back. Another way, which was not good, was simply to hook up to the edge of the rug and double that burlap and put it back like that, and that didn't wear at all. Not well. So those were a few ways that it was done. The squares that I'm using for a sample today are very typical of Lunenburg County. They're very well known everywhere for their geometric type of rugs. Flowers were done in the valley, and Cheticamp were more like story rugs. But Lunenburg County were geometric, made with squares or triangles or that kind of pattern. Not all together, but that was traditional. They're well known for that.
Are there any common mistakes that can happen during hooking?
Any what?
Any common mistakes that can happen while you're hooking?
Mistakes. One of the things that women worry about when they're hooking a rug, if they've got quite a big rug and they've got a lot of background, are they going to have enough material to finish it? And that's the biggest problem with them. 4 layers of this will, let's say this is the piece. I can put that into 4 layers. That's how much area that will hook. So they can actually measure the material. But sometimes they're running out and they get panicky. And I just tell them they have to be creative. Make up something that adds in that space that works. And that takes thinking sometimes, but they can do it. My teacher was Mrs. Withrow from Wolfville. She taught under the Handcraft Center in Halifax. She was hired by them to be a teacher. And when I felt, I had taken a few courses in the States, and I felt that I was ready to teach and wanted to. And I didn't want to do what, through the department she was working. So I went with adult education in the high school system and taught in the 40s, in Petit Riviere, in Halifax, in Dartmouth, Sherbrooke Village, many, many places over the province. Loved teaching. And again, it's changed because I'm not teaching as much anymore. I'm just teaching them how to hook. This is the hook. This is what you do with it. Very simple. And they go home and there was one woman visited me this summer from England. She'd never done anything. She raises horses. And she's never felt she had the time to do anything creative. She took a picture of seaweed on the beach. And I wish you could see the piece she did. It's absolutely beautiful. And she had the tide coming in, just so imaginative. And all I did was show her that. So that's why I've stopped teaching what I was taught. I think there's something better there. I think there's an artist in everybody. And I think it's important for me to bring that out, not to teach them what I know.
So in this way, you're somewhat changing the process yourself by adding your own design and process to it. So it's
Yes.
kind of your unique way of doing it, and
Yes.
other people will then learn to do it, and so it's kind of your legacy.
Yes, it is like a legacy. That's exactly right. The girl from England is so surprised herself, and her friends can't believe it. To see something beautiful and artistic when she's never done anything like that before. Wonderful to see. Exciting.
Could you tell us more about this table?
Yes, certainly I can. I have one at home that I sit on. It fits under my legs like this and comes up here, and it's a small one, and it's a traveling one. It's very easy to take in the car. This is what I call a studio frame. And it was made by Greg Howard in Home Bay. And what I like about it is that this is adjustable this way, so I can tilt it any way I want to. It's adjustable this way. Let's go down here. I can have it at the chair at any height I want, so I can have it quite high, and I can put that in place very easily. And I can pull the whole thing into me, no matter what chair I'm sitting in, my big comfortable chair at home or whatever. I can pull it in and make the adjustment so that this is exactly where I want it to be, and so I can sit up straight and work. I usually have a little backrest in here, because if you spend hours at this, which I sometimes do, you can, you need to be sitting up straight and a good posture. I love the frame. I've had it around